Okay, as promised, we are back with the Han Dynasty. That is 202 BC to 2020 AD. And due to a discussion in class, it seems a few of you do not know what AD stands for. It does stand for Anno Domino, which is literally translated Year of Our Lord. It is not after death. It is Year of Our Lord. Just think about the fact that, yes, it is based on Christianity, but the birth of Christ is year 1, not when he died at 33. So it is Anno Domino. CE means Common Era, the era in which we live. So the Han Dynasty lasted over 400 years, from 202 BC to 220 AD/CE we just need to say 220. What is its legacy? Well, it had a centralized power, ended legalism. Legalism is a look at harsh law. They believe that man is born evil. Very Hobbes. And they got rid of that and they switched back to Confucianism. This softened punishments and it lowered taxes. They also brought peace and stability back to China. Remember me mentioning there were parties when Emperor Qin died? Which means that the Han rulers had the mandate of heaven. So their political legacy under Wu Di. Wu Di is considered one of their great emperors. Think of him more as an Abraham Lincoln type, but without a civil war. So he brought back civil service. So think of him more as a Jefferson. So he conquered and colonized Manchuria, Korea, expanded south into what is now Vietnam, strengthened and structured bureaucracy because he used the everyday person. You became a bureaucrat not because of who you were related to, but because you passed the test. It's what you know, not who you know. Adopted Confucianism to replace legalism, assimilated newly conquered peoples, and implemented a civil service. So what is civil service? Civil service is a system in which we hire government workers. So during the Han Qin dynasty in the Zhao, it was very much who you knew. You hired family. It was nepotism. During the Han government, officials were hired based on their knowledge of Confucius principles. Students were required to study and pass rigorous exams. So what was the effect of having a civil service exam? The government jobs based on merit rather than wealth or loyalty to the emperor were first established, the first university. And that was once again based on Confucius principles. So they also invented, and yes, this is a Han, painting. No ancient Chinese painting. The Chinese look at the Europeans when it comes to art and ask, why do you love realism so much? And I could tell them, because we like things that look real. But this is a good example. They like more of the artistic technique. And they invented paper, the paper we use today, the stuff made out of tree pulp. Also several agricultural tools, which include the wheelbarrow and the collar harness that you put around your oxen. They also invented the water mill. So Han's China economy was primarily agriculture. The population exploded to 60 million people because there was enough food for 60 million people to survive. Trade and industry were important too, but were secondary. Han government had monopolies on salt mining, forging of iron, and minting of coins. So they're not perfect. Government had monopolies. Yes, that's more socialist. So in the classical period, China would become a manufacturer to the world, trading along the Silk Road, which you will have notes on next week, and Indian Ocean routes. So along the Silk Road, they didn't just send silk. That just happens to be the most desired item coming out of China, because they kept the production of silk out to make it a very close secret. There were punishments if you tried to share that secret. So also porcelain, there's a reason porcelain is called China, and paper were traded along the Silk Roads. So this is an example of porcelain. Here's some of our examples of silk. Europeans love silk. Everybody loves silk. Silk's a great material. It can be a bit slimy, but it's soft. It looks pretty. It sews well. It's silk. Satin slides too much when you try to sew it. However, socially, the Han Dynasty wasn't as great for women. They were expected, because of Confucianism and the beliefs of Confucianism, to devote themselves to their families. So Confucian principles established that the role of woman was to obey husbands and husbands' families. We'll talk more about Confucianism next unit when we're going to cover all the major religions, including the 5 major ones of today. And we're going to go all the way back to the Mesopotamians and their pantheons. We'll also hit Egypt and ancient Greece before we get into Greece. So women were considered to be pure and obedient and faithful. Some upper-class women were educated and lively and independent. So the primary social classes comprised of classic China. So once again, one of our unit pillars of civilization is having a social structure. And as usual, landowning aristocracy, including the educated and bureaucrats, paid no taxes on their land. So the aristocracy and the bureaucrats. At least in this case, it means the middle class is being moved up to the higher class instead of being pushed down to the lower. In the middle, the peasants and laborers are now the middle class and artisans who make manufactured goods. And then there are the mean people. I'm air quoting even knowing that my camera's not on. Those without meaningful skills, including performing artists. Yeah, they look down at the actors and the jugglers. Slavery was not widespread in the Han Dynasty, unlike the Qin, and did not produce goods, so they're under that. They're mean people, basically. Merchants were looked down upon because they, according to Confucius, didn't work as hard as the bureaucrats. If you know any merchants, you know that's a bunch of BS. So they did end up adopting also Buddhism. So Buddhism came in during the Han Dynasty. It came up through the Indus Valley where it was born and was greatly embraced in China. So although Buddhism had arrived during this time along the Silk Roads through the traders and monks, it was not widely spread yet, but it will be. So their principles were not well accepted because they do conflict with Confucianism ideas of filial piety, meaning your greatest devotion goes to your family. Buddhist is more, if you watch The Last Airbender, you'll see a Buddhist style among the airbenders themselves in Shanks. Yes. Flashbacks, that's what we call them. So when it flashes back to life among the airbenders, that's when you can see an example of what a Buddhist monk looks like. In the Han Dynasty was a time of prosperity, while Buddhism's monastic lifestyle rejects materialism, as you can see in not just Last Airbender, but many ancient Chinese movies with the monks. There's a definite rejection of materialism. And so this stifled its spread until the end of the dynasty when people realized maybe materialism isn't everything. So why did it decline? Well, there's a widening gap between rich and poor. And I'm going to tell you now, this is a definite cause and effect we see throughout history. As the gap gets wider and wider, you are courting rebellion. We'll discuss this in great detail during the French Revolution. So it causes political instability in the later Han Dynasty, but at least has better results than what we're going to talk about when we see this pattern again in France in the 18th century. So the Yellow Turban Rebellion was a revolt by desperate peasants to redistribute land from the wealthy to the peasant class. Once again, if the wealthy is hoarding all the land and money, you're going to have the lesser, the third estate or third social tier rebel against you. So as small landowners died, their lands divided equally among their sons, which means it gets smaller and smaller. The more sons you have, the more you have to divide. And the lots became too small to produce anything. In some cases, maybe you can't even put a house on it. And I know one of my uncles, my uncles all inherited my grandparents' land. Mom was supposed to just get the money, but one of them has borrowed it all. Plans to give his portion of the land to his sons. Well, he has 3 sons. So, and his oldest son has 2. So you can see this through generations getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So they, once again, become too small to put anything on, including even the barn, which, yeah, one of my great-nephew, or first cousins, twice removed, pretty much just has the garage with a little apartment over it. That's his inheritance. So large landowners are paying no taxes on their lands, so these poor ones are paying all the taxes. Not going well. In the decline of the Han Dynasty, social unrest leads to the assassination of the last Han ruler. Patterns. You can see this in many rebellions and civil wars where somehow the king gets his head chopped off. Or in one of our future units, guillotined, also meaning chopped off. And this disintegrates into 3 rival kingdoms, which we will go over probably next week as well, as I'm trying to catch my online students up with my in-class, because this is going originally just to my in-class students to do a flip class, but frankly, guys, they've already seen it all, and we even did Kahoot. So I'm going to have to pick up my online a bit to catch up. Otherwise, they're going to be full units ahead. So that is it for Up to the Han Dynasty. We are going to stop and talk about that Silk Road next week. Bye.